All right, so today I'm going to be talking with Father Jojo Fung, who is a Jesuit and associate professor in the Loyola School of Theology near Manila, and is finishing up a term as our Cavalieri Chair at BC. His research is on creational pneumatology, cosmicism as an emerging pneumatic mysticism, and inspirited leadership, and it has included ethnographic fieldwork among indigenous communities in Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, basically all over Southeast Asia. And he has just published a book, Sacred Sustainability, Polyhedral Christianity, and Cosmic Challenges. So thanks for joining me today, Jojo. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Yeah,
Great.
feeling the cold.
Feeling the cold, yes. It's definitely the winter out here now. Um, is there anything that I didn't mention that people should know about you before we jump into things?
Actually, I'm from the Borneo Island, the northern part, which is known as Sabah, that has joined Malaysia. No? So Borneo has been mentioned as the third biomass because of its basin in Carrera Amazonia number 48 in together with Congo Basin and then the Amazonian Basin. No? Yeah, thanks.
Okay, great. It's a very particular part of nature to be coming out of, to be reflecting on these issues.
Yes, thank you.
So a while back, someone else who joined us for a webinar, I think it was Damien Costello, who works with North American indigenous spirituality.
Yeah.
And I think it was off the webinar that he pointed out that in recent decades there's been a lot of work in expanding from a kind of vertical upward towards God facing spirituality in the Christian tradition, where we've become more horizontal and more focusing on a spirituality that where we're looking at our human neighbors. And he suggested that the next step is we need to find another lateral movement in that spiritual development and noticing the spirits that are in animals and otherwise in nature,
Yeah.
more generally. Um, what do you see as the relationship between the Holy Spirit and spirits in nature? Why would that be important for us to develop that kind of a spirituality?
Yeah. First of all, is to mention that, in the indigenous cultures and spirituality, or we say they are living traditions, very often you hear this repeated that everything has spirits. Um, I think this is important to correlate with our what we call horizontal dimension of our faith. For me, it is really to reflect on what Origen said. God is one who created and set in order all things, and who, when nothing existed, caused the universe to be. For me, this is very important to look at the relationship between everything has spirit in relation to the Holy Spirit. So, in other words, what we ask the question, what's the relationship between the Holy Spirit and the other spirits? When Origen said this, then I reflected on what he said. This God who is one decided to share life outside of God's self, and therefore the sharing of life leads to what we call creation coming into existence. And this God who is spirit, based on John chapter 4, verse 24, is the indwelling presence within the entire creation. And this indwelling presence uh, is is what we call the Triune Spirit or the Holy Spirit, and this Spirit dwells within the entire creation. What becomes fascinating for me is to realize that the indwelling of God's presence in all of creation is not just a cosmic presence, but it's also in everything, in every creature, in every human, in every culture, in every religion. So it is an indwelling presence or we call it an omnipresence. And that presence is also particularized, meaning to say that it is also an indwelling in this particular stone, while we don't collapse God's, omnipresence with that stone, because we believe that God is in all things and all things in God. So we believe in panentheism, God in all things and all things in God. In that sense, when that Holy Spirit or this God indwelling spirit is particularized in created creatures or things, then you can say that God's indwelling presence is also present in that stone, in that tree, in that mountain. So, in that sense, there is an effort to bridge between the Holy Spirit, whose omnipresence is also particularized, to the point that we can understand, at least for myself, and therefore for many of us who practice the horizontal dimension of the Christian spirituality, that for indigenous people, indeed, there is a spirit, and we relate it to God's omnipresence or God's indwelling in everything. And that, I think, is the bridge between the belief in the Holy Spirit in relation to the many spirits that the indigenous peoples talk about. No? And for indigenous people, they do believe, if you ask them when they're Catholic, this spirits in the trees, the spirit in the animals is related to the Holy Spirit, no? Because God omnipresence gives life to the rock, the trees, and therefore they don't deny at all that the many spirits also participate in the life and indwelling presence of this omnipresent God. So it's good also to really arrive at an understanding by indigenous people. The understanding that there are many spirits also tells us that the entire nature, the entire creation is sacred and spirited by God's presence. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm kind of getting a sense of maybe sort of two ideas that you're mentioning. There's an issue of scale or granularity or resolution, that God's omnipresence is in gigantic things, like in the whole universe, in all of humanity, in all of nature, but it's also present in each little particular thing as well. And you could probably shrink it down to however small of a particular thing you want to look at, and God's still in there in a way. Um, and then at the same time, it's uh, part of the way that we can understand these spirits and these natural things, it sounds like, is because God's spirit is in there giving them life and existence in each individual thing. Am I
Mm.
understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes. Yeah. So
Okay.
it follows with what we call the incarnation, no? The incarnation, this God taking up all that is created, no, in the
Hmm.
cosmos to become part of who God is in terms of becoming a human in the person of Jesus Christ. So this incarnation takes up all matters, that
Hmm.
is in creation. So following the Genesis account, everything that God has created within creation is taken up through the incarnation, and therefore it does suggest that God values, values creation that has been brought into existence. Therefore, the Genesis account gives us a sense that everything God has created is good, is beautiful, is to be related to with reverence and respect. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Um, Another thing I wanted to ask you about is an idea that I picked up from Pope Francis from Laudato Si.
Yes.
There are a number of places in that document where he seems to be pointing to the idea that it's important for people to have some kind of direct encounter with nature in order to adequately appreciate it. Um, And one thing that he does there that stood out to me is he quotes Saint John of the Cross. I'll just read that passage real quickly, where Saint John is saying, "Mountains have heights, and they are plentiful, vast, beautiful, graceful, bright, and fragrant. These mountains are what my beloved is to me." Speaking of God, obviously. And then lonely valleys are quiet, pleasant, cool, shady, and flowing with fresh water in the variety of their groves and in the sweet song of the birds. They afford abundant creation and delight to the senses, and in their solitude and silence they refresh us and give rest. These valleys are what my beloved is to me. So he's kind of showing, having this experience of, an encounter with different things in nature and then revealing different aspects of God to him. Um, what kind of insight can you share about is there a role for having direct experiences or encounters with nature for developing that kind of lateral spirituality? If so, how do you see that working?
Yeah, maybe the line that we need to remember is nature creation is uh, a revel, revelation, no? So we use the word revelatory. Huh? It does bring home to God a sense that this God is here, no? So it does tie in with Emmanuel. Huh? God is with us, no? God is amongst us. So in that sense, everything God has created really reveals this God who is indwelling in creation. No? This God is with us. This God really accompanies us. Huh? So I like the sense of synodality as well. This God accompanies us. How? Through, especially, through creation, through nature. What is very interesting is the seasonal changes. Does reminds us that this God is always there with us, in season, out of season, through the four seasons. So I think it's very important for us to be encountered by this God as we admire, the splendor of sunrise and sunset, or the appearance of the moon at night, or the changing of the color of the leaves in the season that we go through. Is to go behind the whole revelation of this God who constantly encounters and reveals God's self to us, really strengthening our relationship with this God in and through nature, in and through creation. But more than that, no, to experience a sense of oneness with nature, in that oneness with this God. I think that's a great way. Huh? So Meister Eckhart talking about oneing. No? I think that sense of communion with uh, where God encountered us through, the sunset, sunrise, through the colors of the leaves, the breezes that blows through the leaves. All those are moments where I firmly believe that God really encounters us. And God reminds us that I am always with you. I'm journeying alongside you, within you, around you. Yeah.
So, in order to experience that oneness, how do I understand that happening? Is it something that come to I come to that sunset, for example, with an intention of being aware of attending that? Is it something that comes to us as a grace that uh, the Spirit just gives to us? How does that work exactly? Experiencing that
Yeah.
oneness.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I think one has to be intentional, wanting to be open to be encountered by God. And so the revelation of this God encountering me is also from outside, meaning through the sunset. So I think it's very important also to close one's eyes, and open one's mind and one's heart, to really experience then this God who is encountering me from outside. At the same time, this God is also indwelling within me. So Latter-day Day number 25, 26 says, nature is part of me, I'm part of nature. And therefore, this God who is part of nature, indwelling in nature, is also indwelling in me, and as I'm part of nature, part of creation. It's also allowed this God who is spirit to reveal from within me, within
Mm,
me. Oftentimes I feel that what Jesus say in John 17:28, that the Spirit will teach you makes sense. Because the Spirit will teach you from within to connect with His divine presence that is from outside, from nature, and encountering us, leading us to that experience of oneness, or
mhm.
one with God in creation. Yeah.
So there's a way in which we're already carrying a part of that awareness within ourselves, and it's just
Mm.
having the encounter helps bring it to our intention on some way.
Yes.
If we're open to noticing it.
Yes, correct. Yeah. I think it's good to close one's eyes, in that moment, so that we take it all in, so that, when we close our eyes, there's a sense that there's a flow of this God, the presence of this God in and out of me, and we connect our heart, our mindfulness, our, you know, capacity to experience really at the level of my uh, deep contemplation, we call it. No? As we close our eyes, I think that the wonders will happen, within myself, because we allow the Spirit to really teach us within that experience. Yes.
Mm, thank you. So, one question, I know you've written a bit about this. I wonder if you could explain for us what is creation care. So we're noticing there's this connection, this oneness that we need to experience with it, and maybe from that there's some implication of care that happens. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, because it is in this experience of wanting, with creation, and therefore wanting with God, realizing that God also enters communion with us. So the wanting is not just, it's a reciprocal movement. I am experiencing wanting with creation, with God, but God is also wanting with us at the same time. That wanting of God with us through creation makes me realize all the more that creation cares for us, cares for this earth. And therefore, I grow in that sense in the last few months, that this God cares for me through creation, and therefore creation cares for me how? Especially, through the sunlight. The sunlight for photosynthesis, that enables the plants, the trees, the ecosystem to create, oxygen, and the sunlight, when it shines on our skin, it does
And when
produce
it's cold,
vitamin
when it's cold like this,
D3, yeah, vitamin D3. So at least, I think it's also important to experience creation caring for me in terms of the air we breathe, so that at least, momentarily, when we close our eyes, be experience that, that supply of oxygen on a daily basis, that God has never failed, and therefore creation has never failed us. So the sunlight, I think, is one experience, of how creation cared for us in terms of enabling photosynthesis, and then our own skin to manufacture, um, what we call vitamin D3. And also recently, I get a stronger sense now God cares for me through the animals, the bees, the birds, the biodiversity around us, And I also try to make an effort while I'm cycling to feel the care of creation, Even telling myself, the ground on which I cycle, uh, the room where I stay, where I study, where I sleep, this is the way creation cares for me. And of late, I also realized, what I drink, the food that I take, the minerals that I derive from the food, the nutrients, the vitamins, the water, nurtured life, not just my life, but all human lives, the life of all life forms on this earth. So all these moments becomes for me. This is how creation care for me on a daily basis. Yeah, I hope it makes some sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, we often think of that phrase, creation care, about our responsibility to care for the earth,
Mhm.
for creation, but you're noticing, paying attention to how actually creation is taking care of us. Is there a
Mm.
relationship between those two things?
Yeah, it is like a human relationship, no? When someone you love, like your mother or your best friend, cares for you, you notice that you grow in that affection for. And that affection is translated in terms of caring for, loving the other, huh, who really has first loved you, first cared for you, no? So I think it's in the area of affection, no? Emotions of I feel important, being cared for, being loved, and therefore you reciprocate that. No? You say that in return, arising from my heart is also this sense of affection and care for the other who has first loved me and cared for me. Yeah. So more in terms of human relationship as well. Huh?
Yeah. Um, like one concept you're getting really close to talking about there is related to my next question. It's how does gratitude relate to all of this? The issue of creation care and care for creation.
Yeah, I think there's a guy called Stan McKay. In 1996, he wrote this. This line I think really makes a lot of sense. Quote: "Thanksgiving for the earth, gratitude to the earth is important. Why? Because we are to enjoy it and share it in service of others. No, and this is the way to grow in unity and harmony. In other words, when I felt so cared for and so loved, I think part of the affectivity or the emotions arising from my heart is a sense of thanksgiving, a sense of gratitude, no? To be grateful for, not to take for granted, not to presume, but to, in that, in that experience of wanting is to take the Creator so seriously as to be grateful to the Creator who through creation, who through this earth provides for me. So it's also in the sense of providence, providence that was stated in dyslexic day number 75. The sense of providence, God caring for me, and loving us, and therefore out of that it evokes within my heart a sense of gratitude to this God who has given me this sacred gift of creation on an everyday basis, so that this gift enable me to live with gratitude. Yeah, thanks.
Mhm. I'm kind of uh, curious about that quote that you shared. How it seems that something about that gratitude exists, sure, between us and creation, but then it also changes our relationships with other people.
Yeah, it
for
does.
others in the environment as well. So that
Yeah,
is an interesting observation there.
yeah. So I think
Uh,
it evokes within us a sense of gratitude, but also in my own sense, certainly in my own life, a sense of generosity and humility, commitment to serve the others. No, the others are people on the periphery of society, and that includes the wounded earth. No, as stated in Laudato number 2. No, the earth is among the most abandoned and maltreated among the poor. So that sense of giving oneself in generosity, in humility, before this all loving God to the service of others. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so one thing I'm particularly curious about, is there an example that you could share from your ethnographic field work that helps to inform your views on creation care?
Yeah. One of the most uh, memorable memory and experience has been, the invitation by the Korean people to, the prayer, the ritual, at the we call it the spring, the spring of the stream leading to the river, because they perform that ritual. No? It's actually a ritual of gratitude.
Can you give us a little background on who the Karen people are, where they
The Korean
live?
people,
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes they use the word Pga K'nyau. It means the people living in Chiang Mai. They are also in Myanmar. So this is one of the many ethnic communities or indigenous communities in northern Thailand. So they do
Okay.
conduct an annual ritual of Thanksgiving, invocation as well. Thanksgiving for what? No, for a bountiful harvest the year before, for the ritual connects, with the creator. They call it Tatitato, the creator, or they sometimes use mystic owner. No? The creator has blessed us with a bountiful harvest the year before, and now is also to invoke the creator, no? To send, uh, to send blessings, for this year's planting of the rice, so that there will be abundance of rain. But more than that, the climate will be favorable. Then that the young seedlings of the rice will be also protected from pest or pestilence. So there's this ritual of thanksgiving, invocation for blessings for this year's planting. Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. The structure there is the gratitude for the last year's harvest. Does
Mhm.
that become like a rationale for making the petition for the coming year? Is it, how do those two things connect?
I think that the two movement goes together, no, which is very much part of our Christian prayer, spirituality, the celebration of the Mass or Eucharist, where there is a sense of gratitude to this God. There's also an invocation of this God for blessings for what we do. So yeah, it is interrelated movement, no? And that the invocation is certainly a downward movement, asking for blessings from God, from the Creator, for all that we plant, for the water that we channel, no, or canalize to the different plots of paddy, for planting paddy. It is really, yeah, it is really blessings the human relationship with the Creator, with the plants, with the field, with the land, and therefore suddenly with the earth itself. Yeah,
Hmm.
or the earth herself. Yes.
Yeah. So the last question I have is, what are some practical steps that someone could take to develop this sort of ecological lateral spirituality?
Yes, I would strongly advocate to have a plant. James and I, mindfully aware that we need to relate to nature through a plant. No? So I feel it is important to have a plant in your living room, in your office, even in your bedroom. I have two plants in my bedroom, no?
Yeah.
And to initiate a conversation, a relationship with. No? For instance, the two plants in my room, my bedroom. When I say initiate a relationship with, I mean you talk to the plants, but I ask the plant, tell me how do you want me to call you? In other words, tell me your name. There's one plant that looks like a Y. So then the name revealed to me is Ya Ya. And then I have another plant which is a money plant. So it looks like a jelly. It looks like a
Hmm.
jelly. Yeah. So I said, um, I have the impression you look like a jelly. What do you want me to call you? So then I listen. Jelly is the name. So I have two plants in my room. So one is Yaya and one is Jelly. I think this is the way we begin, no? Nature is not far away outside, but nature is within my living room, no? So that will lead us to wanting to relate to nature, and especially with COP30, in Belém, Brazil, no? There's so much talk about near zero deforestation by 2030. No? I think we really need to relate to nature in a way that the relating to the plant within my room is our way of relating to the need for advocating for forest. No? We have to preserve what is already existing forest. We have to ensure we need to generate land for forestation. No? Because only then we will stabilize the climate by sequestering carbon, regulating rainfall, preventing soil erosion, and supporting agriculture. No? More than that, because of the forest, it will halt the spread of zoonotic diseases like COVID-19, many of which originate in the disturbed wildlife habitats. Perhaps last of all is to prevent biodiversity loss and to sustain the traditional ways of life of local communities, especially farming communities. Yeah. Thanks.
Right. So there's a little bit of like something I can do. I can name my plants here in my office. But
Mm.
also we need to be participating in, it sounds like, the what's going on in our civic institutions in terms of protecting uh, natural habitats and so forth.
Yes. That
Great.
also keeps alive the biodiversity, the ecosystem, the animals and the bees there. Because I think we need to take seriously that these are God's creation, no? Not just as humankind, but other kinds as well, no? Including this earth, this creation, relating to them with reverence and respect, with humility. This is God's sacred gift to us. And this creator, no? This creator bothers out of love to really give this sacred creation to me on a daily basis. No, yeah. Hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. It sounds kind of a, maybe I'm making this up, but there kind of a thread through what you're saying, what you've been saying to me, reflects a need to really just like pay attention myself to like how dependent I am on all of this in creation.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
It's the image of the vine and the branches. No, cut
Hmm.
off from this vine, no? My life will withers. No, I am nothing. So I'm totally dependent on creation caring for me on a daily basis. No, you just cut the oxygen, you cut the sunlight, uh, we are done, man.
Yeah, yeah,
We are really done.
that's true. Well, thanks for this conversation, Jojo. Is there anything you'd like to finish off that we didn't talk about that people should know or understand about care for creation or engaging in the spirituality with nature?
Yeah, I just want to share this morning's experience in my prayer. No? I was quite caught up with, blessed black out in terms of the sacred circle or the sacred hoop. Is to realize that, one is living within this sacred, which most indigenous communities call the seamless web of life. It is within this circle. This morning I experienced it's not just a circle that is encircling the earth. No, it is really a circle encircling the entire cosmos. So I felt this morning that what is described as a dream catcher, but it's also a sacred hope that is a cosmic hope as well. Is to realize that within this cosmic hope, we all live interconnected, interrelated, and also we are interdependent. And that makes me grateful and humble before God, realizing my own creaturely place within this cosmic sacred hope. So I think that sense of humility and gratitude, reverence, dispositions and attitudes that will carry us through uh, our transition, no? From a more technocratic life to a more reverential life, no? So that we together, no, as humankind and other kinds, really transition into a world that is more livable, more sustainable, especially when we are so aware, no, of the erratic climate changes recently in Sri Lanka, before that in Vietnam, before that in the Caribbean, no. So we had really transgressed, the planetary boundary in terms of the 1.5 degrees Celsius, no. So I think we need to be so mindful that the warning keeps up a sense that we ought to be grateful for the way God cares for us through creation, and therefore we really need to care for nature, for this earth, and those who suffer the most, meaning the poor, the most vulnerable on this planet Earth, so that we leave a greener garden that is livable, no, for future generations. Let's not destroy the dreams of the young, of the children with us. No, yeah. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Well, thanks for your time
Thank
today,
you.
Jojo, and I look forward to chatting with you again.
Yes. Thank you. And thanks to this plan too.
Yes.
Okay.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
Goodbye.
Blessings. Blessings of Advent to all of you. Bye bye.